With the CentreCourt Festival bringing together so many of the world's top business schools, this idea of an international community, and of course at many of the top European schools, we're talking very often about 50, 60, 70 nationalities that all come together for that MBA experience. I'm delighted to welcome a truly international citizen. I'm joined by Joanna Merker, who is an IESE MBA from 2018. Joanna, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, I talked about your background, and of course, you mentioned that you're actually born in Barcelona. So going to IESE to do the MBA was sort of coming full circle, but you know, half German, half Norwegian, a career that you've built. You're currently a program manager with Google in Dublin. That international dimension, was it something that was really important to you when you were thinking about business school?
It was definitely, and I'd say IESE has one of the most, at least when I was looking at it, diverse programs and diverse profiles. So I think my class had 60 plus nationalities. And it was really something that I wanted to experience, being in an environment where I could meet people from all over the world, connect and learn from everyone. So that is one of several reasons why I chose the IESE MBA.
Right. Now, at undergrad, you'd studied international marketing at BI, and then had a year at IESE in Barcelona, and then had built a very successful career as a communications advisor. What then sort of said to you, you know, maybe it's time to go back to school and the MBA?
I think it's quite mixed. So I did my undergrad, so I had 3 years, a bachelor's degree. And I sort of, at the time, at least in Norway, having a master's or an MBA technically is much more common. So I started working under the financial crisis, basically in 2009. And my career sort of progressed fairly quickly in 2 different companies. I always knew that I wanted to study more, develop more, learn more, but I wasn't sure exactly what that should be. And then after a few years, I felt the specialization that I would be getting from a master's degree would be something that I wouldn't necessarily be that interested in. And I wanted to take a bigger step towards my career. I wanted to move out of Norway as well, to go in and experience, again, more international cultures, backgrounds, and diverse opinions. So for me, it was really about venturing out again, learning more. And the MBA is a wonderful, I'd say it's a fairly generalist education. It's a broad business perspective. And I was hoping for that also to obviously then help me achieve the more international career that I was looking for, and also make a transition into a different subject matter, because I found that in communications consulting, at least the way that I was working, the path was very linear, and I wasn't interested in sort of progressing further upwards there, but I was looking more towards going into technology, ideally at Google. So that was one of my goals before the MBA.
Right. Many of the European MBA programs are on this sort of shorter 1 year, or some of them 15, 16-month model. Now, IESE offers the 2-year model. Perhaps that's part of the roots with Harvard Business School that was involved in creating the school many, many years ago. Was the course duration also important? I mean, you had an internship with Google, which perhaps then opened doors for the career that you're now enjoying.
That is correct. So for me, the IESE culture and diversity and team focus was one of the reasons why I joined, to get more into the international environment. The 2-year program with the internship experience was actually the second reason, because it really did allow me the time to understand what is it that I'm actually interested in pursuing in terms of my future career. And it also provided the opportunity to go in and test that out, because ultimately you might have an idea of what it is that you want to do, but then you're not quite sure until you're there. And same sort of for the corporate culture, the way of working inside a company, you don't really get many opportunities to sort of test run that before you're actually in the driver's seat of the role that and the company that you ultimately join. So the internship experience was critical and very important for me when I wanted to choose the MBA as well.
Right. I'm sure, you know, since being born in Barcelona, the city has continued to change and evolve. You know, obviously a wonderful tourist destination, but in terms of tech, you know, it's host to the World Mobile Forum and many other areas. So Was that something sort of bringing business and tech together, and given your sort of post MBA goals, did you feel that Barcelona then provided that dynamism and the ability to really get closer to the tech industry?
Definitely. I'd say, I think I wasn't sure how necessary the MBA would be, to be honest, before starting, because there's lots of discussions around you don't necessarily need an MBA for all sorts of tech roles, for example. Often there's, especially for the startup community that I also worked in Norway previously, though not in tech, it's a bit more scrappy. It's a bit more untraditional. There's different types of backgrounds and profiles accepted. But I did see that Barcelona definitely had sort of that vibe and vibrancy to the city. Also from a cultural food, people, music perspective. So it was sort of the opportunity to be able to live in Barcelona again for 2 years, to get closer to everything within the tech environment. And it was also a financial decision ultimately, because Barcelona provides you with a different cost of living than doing an MBA in London, for example. So you just have a better quality of life. You can go out pre-COVID. You can go out for dinners, you can sort of meet people outside, and it's still affordable. You're close to the ocean, close to the mountains. So it was just a very combined, mixed set of choices that led me to that program.
Lots of skills, business skills, and of course an incredible network that you're then tapping into. In terms of a personal journey, and just this idea of going back to school and investing in yourself at both a personal and a professional development level, what do you think that you learned about yourself?
Look, so for me, going back to school was a fairly big decision, and MBAs in Norway are not very common, which is where I was living before I did the MBA. So people do part-time programs later on in their careers, but they don't really stop full-time, especially not for 2 years, to go back and study. So for my sort of network, my group of friends, and my family, it was fairly unheard of to just take that time. But no, so for me, I think besides lots of technical skills, I think one of the things that I realized throughout the MBA, and it took a while, and I might have even realized it after finishing and graduating, is that I am probably way more analytical than I've given myself credit for. So coming into the MBA, I had a more untraditional background in a sense, because what you would see is a lot of engineering backgrounds. You'd see more of the technical field, people who have studied in much more analytical programs before. So mine with the international marketing and then communications consulting was considered sort of a softer background. And I felt, I think at times during the MBA, that I was fighting through a little bit of prejudice, probably a lot of it that I put on myself as well, in terms of my own analytical abilities. And I've later had comments from both my manager at Google during my internship, but also later on in my Google career now, that I'm a very analytical person, and I don't think I gave myself credit for that before. I think the second thing is a level of resilience. In a sense, like I think people always talk about how your career and your work and your life. Sometimes people say, "Oh, it's not a sprint; it's a marathon." I actually I slightly disagree with that one, because I think it's a series of sprints. And I think that that's something that I also learned throughout the MBA, is that sometimes you need to hustle and you need to pull yourself together and you need to really scramble to get things done. But then you also need a recovery period where you breathe and you relax and you sort of recover from what you've been through before you can go on and get out for a next sprint. So I think that part was important as well. And then there's the part on, like walking away and when you've had too much, or in a way prioritizing. And I think that that's what an MBA really gives you, because especially during the first year in IESE, it was very intense in terms of course load and work. And I think we basically, you had the impression that, okay, well, I need to prioritize between sort of sleeping and socializing and doing the coursework. And somehow everyone survived, everyone made it through, right? But at the time, it felt very intense. So then figuring out what are the pieces that I will leave behind, what are the pieces that I won't focus on, because ultimately you could spend every waking hour, and even sort of with complete lack of sleep, you could have just spent time learning and studying without even seeing people, and it might have still not been enough. So I learned to prioritize and say what is good enough versus when do I go the extra mile.
Right. I suppose compared to other graduate programs that very often people will then pursue immediately or very soon after their bachelor's and undergrad. In your case, there was 7 years between finishing undergrad and then going back to business school for the MBA. Just how it ensures that you haven't pigeonholed yourself. You talked about analytical skills that perhaps you weren't aware of it or had really given the freedom to explore, which obviously is now playing a key role with Google. Talking about employers, obviously you went into the program with this idea of looking for that position at Google, and that's what you achieved. As you look at both you and classmates, how does IESE then help you in terms of defining those career goals and the doors that it then opens for you?
So IESE has sort of a wonderful career coaching team. Obviously, I had several very good conversations on the career coaching side of it. In a sense, so to realize that your career is not necessarily linear. I mean, you do a lot of reading about that. You do reflect on that a lot prior to the MBA probably as well. But the way that ultimately, if you want to do a certain thing, there are multiple ways to that goal, but you might need to go through 1 or 2 steps before you get to your ultimate goal in a way. So a little bit of pragmatism around that. I'd say what I also had is very strong friendships. So I usually say that sort of career coaching and mentoring can come from anyone. It can come from someone who has the official ability and structure to it, which we had at IESE in terms of our career team. But I also feel like some of the friendships and very close connections that I made during my time at IESE, which is one of the things I value the most after graduating as well. Some of those relationships really allowed me to just analyze my career, figure out what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, what really motivates me and drives me, and have those sort of real, honest, proper conversations. And we sort of mapped things out together in a meeting room. We sat down, we said, okay, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, where do you want to go? How do you see yourself getting there? What is it that you need to learn and improve on? And become very structured and organized around that part as well. So I'd say it's both on the formal side, so career services, conversations with professors, but also the courses that we had made me realize the things that I actually do enjoy more. And then on the informal side, the network and the friends that I made during the time at IESE as well.
With all of that self-awareness, part of that journey starts applying to the school. And of course, IESE is a very selective school. You mentioned earlier about the entrepreneurship scene in Scandinavia and in Norway, quite different. But you yourself had done pro bono work for social enterprise and for charities. Did that also play a part in the story that you shared, how you were then contributing to the community? And is that something that then resonates with this close-knit community at a school like IESE?
I definitely say so. I think in terms of IESE, I'd say cultural fit is a huge part of your application process. And by cultural fit, I don't mean that you're supposed to be like as everyone else, but really sort of unique and different to your own style and preferences. And I'd say anything that was sort of outside of my very formal and official resume and CV, those experiences were definitely discussed during my application process, and I'd say they definitely weighed towards a positive sort of review based on my application. The other side to that is it shows initiative, right? So you're doing something that is beyond your official role and scope. And I'd say IESE has a very strong culture about giving back to community, to society, to each other. And that is very much lived throughout the program. So I'd say what they're really looking for are people who are willing to do that, give back to each other as well, because you're working in teams for so much of the time. You'd see professors spending an enormous amount of time and being very available to students as well, which I found a very positive surprise after starting the program as well. So I'd say that it's just it's a strong community sense and community feeling and culture, and the volunteering experience, the social entrepreneurship, definitely contributed into that as well, in my profile at least.
Taking the time to research the schools, getting that sense of fit and alignment with a culture or value system. We hope that CentreCourt plays a role in that, and certainly having voices like yours to share your IESE experience, I'm sure will be of enormous value to all of our viewers. So Joanna, thank you very much for taking the time. And I hope that when we reach post-COVID, you'll still be taking care of those pot plants as carefully as you have done in the last few months. But thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's been my pleasure.